on the ballot paper?
Yeah, was it 3? Halfway through the field. It's important in a way, but I think by the time the election comes around, choices for Territorians will be pretty clear, and just looking forward to the weeks ahead.
Are you confident given infighting between the CLP and their splinter groups?
I can understand why there's been some dissatisfaction with the treatment of some of the members of the CLP, but essentially this is not about internal fighting within parties or against parties. This is about who's got the best plan for the Territory and for our future.
Your opponent's campaigning largely on local issues like crime. How concerned are you that criticism of Michael Gunner might actually affect your vote?
Oh, my name's Gosling, not Gunner. Territory issues for the Territory government. What our job is from the federal government is to make sure that there's as much funding and support for the Territory and for the Territory government as possible. So in this election campaign, there will be many issues that are federal. Those without plans for the federal government supporting the Territory will try and amplify Territory government responsibilities. But what I'm focused on is continuing to be a strong voice down in Canberra for Darwin and Palmerston and for all of the Northern Territory. And what will be different this time though is in government, I'll be able to deliver much more.
What do you think will be the major issues for voters in Darwin in this election?
Well, I think jobs is always a big issue. We all want our kids to have jobs. We know that the price of living keeps going up, but wages aren't. So for Labor, in this federal election, we're just saying quite clearly to people that wages will rise with Labor because we will put into place our policies, which are all costed, to make sure that the wages of Territorians are going up. The cost of living is a massive issue, and that's where we'll be focused with a comprehensive training, jobs and wages policy for Territorians so that they can afford to live in the best place in the world.
It's hard to ignore crime as an election issue though when it affects so many Territorians, isn't it?
I'm really passionate about supporting our police as much as we possibly can. Law and order is a Northern Territory government responsibility, but I think there is a big role for the federal government. We not only can make sure that there's enough funding for remote police and for police generally, but also those support services. I think what we've seen is the police haven't got the support that they need. I think the federal government can play a role there. In 2016, when I first committed to a wellbeing centre, it was for emergency services, police, ambos, fireys, as well as veterans. Unfortunately, the Morrison government has been in. They've got a wellbeing centre that's for veterans, but I think we need to provide some more support to police, absolutely 100%.
Your seat also takes in the Royal Darwin Hospital. Would you try to earmark more funding from the federal government if you were to win for that facility?
I personally argued and secured additional funding for the Palmerston Hospital in the past, but also pressure on the federal government to deliver those PET scanners that are so important in the fight against cancer. And I'll continue to press for the funding that we need to have 2 top quality hospitals in my electorate, one in Darwin, the Royal Darwin Hospital, and in Palmerston. Now, federal Labor is committed to a strong Medicare so that all Territorians, no matter how much you earn, have got at least the comfort of knowing that they can go to the hospital and get treated. And I think that's really important for all Territorians to know that Labor strongly backs not only Medicare but the National Disability Insurance Scheme as well. And cuts to both are a real concern that we've seen under the federal government.
If Labor does win government, will you be seeking a ministerial position?
If federal Labor is successful in winning the confidence of the Australian people and we form the next government in the next 3 weeks, I will absolutely be seeking a position as a minister, and I have the leader, Albo's support in that.
And which position are you interested in?
There are a number of roles that I could operate as a minister. Obviously there's the Northern Australia portfolio, there's the defence portfolios, there's a veterans portfolio, and there's also junior roles within foreign affairs and trade, specifically looking at the Pacific and our near neighbours, Indonesia and Timor-Leste. We've got a lot of experience. But first things first, we've got to win the election in a couple of weeks' time. But regardless of the outcome of the election, I'll work with whoever is the Prime Minister. Obviously, I hope it's Albo. Obviously, I wished that Albo was going to be here for Anzac Day on Monday. He's got COVID, but the Deputy Leader, Richard Marles, will be here. And that's a role that he's played in the past in the Pacific. He was our Minister for the Pacific. It is shocking the way that this federal government under Scott Morrison has dropped the ball in the Pacific. We've seen that the Solomon Islands have decided to strike up security relationships with China. That is a total failure of this federal government's foreign affairs policy, defence policy, strategic policy. So we've got a federal government that not only oversaw the selling of the Darwin port to the Chinese, they've now totally failed in the Pacific, so that not too far from the Australian coastline, we've got countries seeing Australia not as a security partner, but looking towards China. That's a total failure and a disgraceful situation to find ourselves in. But federal Labor will re-engage with the Pacific, re-engage with our neighbours, and ensure that we are again a partner of choice in the Pacific for our neighbours in the Pacific, but also in the Indo-Pacific with India, obviously our American alliance partners and the Japanese, but also having constructive and productive relationships that lead to better trade, which means better income for our country, jobs for Australians, and that's what federal Labor's about.
Would you want to see the Darwin port brought back into Australian hands?
I've been clear on the record from the... Do you want to wait for that?
No, it's not.
I've been clear from when the CLP, with Scott Morrison as the Treasurer, that we should not have let the Darwin port go into foreign hands. I was critical of it at the time. I've been consistently critical of it. We are still waiting for the federal government to release a report that looks into whether that port should change its ownership and how that could happen, what different options are. They haven't released that report. The federal government have not released a report about what should happen with the Darwin port. And then they come up here and then they promise another port, a second port, and Defence haven't been consulted in that. It's unclear about what this second port is, what role Defence is going to have in this second port. So I think we can see that not only did the Liberal Party, the federal coalition government, oversee the CLP sale of the port, they're now not coming clean on what the future of the current Darwin port is and what the security experts' advice is, but they're also coming up with pretend replacements that Defence haven't been properly consulted on and don't understand where they fit in with that new port. Add to that, the new port is not even specifically detailed in the Morrison budget. So I think Territorians need a little bit more clarity, a little bit more respect from the federal government, and they certainly need more real investment. Not like the investment that we've seen promised at Kakadu for 3 years, where only 5% of the funding has actually hit the ground out in Kakadu. So we need a fair income federal government that supports the territory, and federal Labor in government has always made sure that the investment hits the ground, and we see the evidence every day because we drive on it on Tiger Brennan. Our elders, our Territorians who get cancer, get treated at the Alan Walker Cancer Centre. We actually get things done in government. So I think that's the choice that Territorians will have when it comes time to vote in a couple of weeks. A federal Labor government that will actually get infrastructure funds onto the ground, giving us jobs and the infrastructure we need to enjoy our great lifestyle, or just more promises and confusing virtue signalling from the federal coalition that doesn't seem to be that committed to the territory at all.